Loud.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. This meeting is being recorded. All right. So we're on page 231 in the Path of the Just. And we are focusing now. We changed direction a little bit. We're still talking about Nikius. Nikius as meaning the refinement, taking our commitments to the next level, where we're trying really hard to get focused even on the detailed components of our lives, spiritual lives. But what we're doing is we're shifting from nikius as it applies to specific actions, mitzvahs in the Torah, and we're now applying nikius to what we call midos, character traits. Meaning this the same concept, the same approach, which is instead of just being generally satisfied with being a good person. I'm a good person. I'm generally kind. I don't get angry too much, and I do nice things for people. That's great. But Nakia says, okay, let's analyze it a little bit more carefully. Let's think about what are the specific components of what good midos look like exactly, and try to really be more focused on the specifics of the midos. So what he's going to do now is he's going to take this principle and apply it to four specific areas. So let's jump in and you'll see on page 231. So the Ramchal notes that he's going to limit his discussion to only a few character traits. The idea here is that he's going to give you the principle and show you how it works in application to four specific traits. And then after that, the concept, the idea is that you can now take it on your own and apply it to all of your midos. It's not just that these are only four areas that you have to apply nikias to. You have to apply nikias to all of your character traits, but he's going to show you how it works with four specific examples. Okay, so now there are many character traits within the human personality. For as varied as all the actions are within a person's capability in this world, so too are the character traits after which he is drawn in performing his actions. However, just as the first part of this chapter, we discussed only the mitzvos regarding which there's a great need to attain nikiyus, namely those sins of action in which people commonly stumble, so too we will discuss only the primary negative character traits in more lengthy analysis, because we are very accustomed to behave with those traits. So the task of Nikias is greatest in their regard. Meaning what he's focusing on now, the four traits that he's going to focus on now are four traits that are specifically challenging to most of us. Okay, these are areas where your average person who is trying to live a spiritual life, who's trying to live an elevated, noble existence, nonetheless is likely to struggle to be challenged on a daily basis. Okay, so what are these traits? They are gaiva, which is haughtiness, kas, which is anger, kina, which is envy, and taiva, which is desire. Now it's interesting, you'll note there's four here. In Pirkei Avos, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, there's a famous statement that says, kina, taiva, and kavod are motzina sa'adam min olam. That there are three character traits that can really literally take a person down, can sort of just ruin their lives in a sense. And those are anger. Well, no, that's not true. Anger is not listed. Kina and taiva are two of them. Envy and desire. And the third one is kavod. Kavod is arrogance. It's like the opposite of humility, which really is the same in a sense as gaiva. So three of the four, haughtiness, envy, and desire, are listed in Pirkei Avos as the three character traits which can remove you from this world. The fourth one here is kas, anger. which is not mentioned in that particular place in Pirkei Avos, but it's obviously a huge issue for many people. So he says these traits are all negative character. These are all negative character traits whose evil is manifest and well known. Right? Everybody, every single person. You talk to anyone in the world. You don't have to be a great Torah scholar. You don't have to be an accomplished spiritual giant of any sort to recognize that these four things are A, really hard for most people, B, really negative and can really destroy your relationships with other people, your relationship with Hashem, your relationship with yourself. And at the same time, they're very common and very hard to overcome. So that's why he's focusing on these particular traits. So that no proof of their evil is necessary. No one has to sit there and prove to you that envy is a bad thing, or that that desire or haughtiness or anger are bad traits. It's obvious to us. It's totally clear to all of us. For indeed, these traits are inherently wrong and also are harmful in their consequences. They're inherently wrong for they are all outside the bounds of common sense and wisdom, and their consequences are harmful, for each one is independently capable of leading a person to serious sins. Do you guys hear background noise? Does anyone hear any background noise? Or is it okay? You do hear background noise? You hear a little 3-year-old in the background?
Yeah, but it's not disturbing.
Okay. Lanish.
Okay.
Okay, we'll see if that works. I doubt it. It might work for 5 seconds. Okay. Okay, so let's delve in. Okay, so before we delve into haughtiness, so the inherent faultiness of these traits is obvious. Ramchal cites proof of their terrible consequences. Regarding haughtiness, wait, I can move also. I don't want her to have to. If she wants to come back in, I'll just go upstairs. Okay. Regarding haughtiness, a clear verse warns of its consequences. Okay, what is the verse? The verse is V'ram livavecha v'shachachta es Hashem Elokecha. What happens when we become haughty? What happens when we become arrogant and focused on ourselves? When we become, you could say maybe narcissistic or fully focused on only on ourselves. So what happens is you become haughty and you forget Hashem, your God. What happens when you forget Hashem, your God? Everything else is out the window. The whole Torah falls apart because the whole Torah is predicated on the understanding that it's all predicated on a very, very consistent and constant awareness of Hashem. You can't be aware of Hashem at the same time that you're being haughty. Haughtiness means you're pushing Hashem out. You're not leaving any room for Hashem in the picture. So if you're haughty, if you're fully focused on yourself, then you're going to forget Hashem. And that, of course, can lead to all kinds of problems religiously. Regarding anger, the sages of blessed memory said, you should consider anyone who becomes uncontrollably angry as if he has committed idolatry. Okay, and we'll have to analyze that. And we will when we get to it, when we get to anger. But why? Let's see if anyone wants to take a stab at it at this moment. Why is anger, why is somebody who becomes uncontrollably angry considered to have served idols? What's the connection between anger and idolatry? Does anyone have any thoughts on that one?
Well, if you get angry at something, you are denying that God's hand in whatever it is that caused you to be angry. So if you're denying God's hand in it, then that's kind of akin to idol worship, as if it's not in charge.
Yeah, exactly. You get angry about a situation. You're supposed to get to a meeting and there's tons of traffic on the highway or whatever, or bus breaks down or whatever might be the case. So if your response is anger, like you said, Michael, it's like, well, obviously Hashem is orchestrating the picture over here. If I'm getting angry, in a sense, I'm saying like, I'm pushing Hashem out of the equation entirely. And yeah, once you do that, then you're no longer serving Hashem. You're serving the bus god or the highway god or whatever might be the other powers that you're attributing, other forces that you're attributing power to.
Or you're focusing on yourself as the preeminent consideration. In fact, it seems to me there are only two ways to live. You either live with Hashem in the center or something else.
So you're saying
else can include the ego.
So you're saying when he says idolatry over here, he means that you're the idol, that you've become, you're worshiping yourself. You've become the idol in a sense, that because once you take Hashem out, then who's in control? Whose power is anything in? Well, it's in your power, which means, okay, good. And then it says regarding envy and desire, we learned in an explicit Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, that's the one I was referring to, Kina, Taiva, and Kavod, Motzin es Adam min Olam, that envy, desire, and honor remove a person from the world. Okay. By the way, it's a nice note down on 104 on the bottom. What does it mean? It removes a person from the world. That is, they lead a person to become so warped that he forfeits any chance of spiritual success. Okay, if you're overcome with jealousy or envy, or you're overcome with desire, meaning you can't control your physical desires, your lusts, your physical lusts for gratifying your physical needs, or you've become so focused on your own honor at the expense of letting Hashem into your reality, then you don't stand a chance to live a spiritual life, a meaningful existence. And you might be walking on this earth, but it's, in a sense, it's as if you've removed yourself from reality. Okay, however, the reflection that is needed in order to attain Nikias in these traits is how to extricate oneself from them and from all of their offshoots. For all of them alike, including their offshoots, are inferior alien vines, just referring to a verse in Jeremiah. Now let us begin discussing them one by one. Okay, so we're going to go into these 4 specific areas one by one and apply Nikias to them, and how to really like show up in a focused way in our lives in these 4 areas, how to really up our game in these 4 specific areas. So he starts by talking about haughtiness. That's the first one. The general idea of haughtiness is this: a person considers himself important in his own estimation, so that in his heart, he fancies that he is befitting of praise. Now, this attitude can emerge from many varying viewpoints, for there is one who considers himself to be an intellectual, another who considers himself to be handsome, another who considers himself to be dignified, another who considers himself great, and another who considers himself knowledgeable. The sum of the matter is, with regard to every positive attribute in this world, if a person thinks that he possesses it, he's immediately at risk for falling into the abyss of haughtiness. Okay, question for you. What should a person do if they are, in fact, gifted in some area? Let's say they have extreme intellectual ability, or unusual athletic talent or musical talent, or whatever it might be. They have some real gift, and in some area they actually are superior to most anybody else. So what am I supposed to do in that case? Pretend that it's not true?
You're supposed to maximize your abilities.
Okay, meaning what? What do you mean by that?
I mean, if you're you have natural brilliance, then you have to study and maximize what you're doing there. You just don't have to talk about it and flaunt it.
So,
And
so
you
you're
need to
saying,
attribute it to God.
okay, so those are two separate things. Let's deal with them separately. So first of all, Larry, you're saying that if you're given some kind of particular gift, let's just say, some kind of unique talent, mathematical mind, a brilliant mathematical mind. So all that means is that you have a heightened level of responsibility to use that gift and contribute to humanity in some way. So your responsibility is to develop that gift and to work hard to develop it and then to be able to contribute in some way. It just really just puts an obligation, a responsibility on you as opposed to something that you should be proud of.
Right. Well, I mean, it as Michael said, Hashem gave you this gift,
right?
And you should not be wasting that gift. But doesn't mean you have to go to your people around you and say, "Wow, I'm a mathematical genius. How can you not be able to figure that out and be haughty in that situation?"
Yeah, definitely. I was at graduation this weekend. They were honoring the valedictorian, who was not my son, just in case you had any thoughts that maybe it was. And I don't remember exactly the line that he used, that the principal used, but the basic idea of the line, the gist of the line was that some people, there are a lot of brilliant people in the world, and some people rely on their brilliance to succeed and get through, and some people take their brilliance and develop it and use it to work hard to become the gifted person that they are. That's really
Oh, Rabbi, that sounds like ChatGPT.
Should we put it in and see what it says? The thing is that Hashem gives us these gifts. We all have gifts. Some people are talented in musically. Some people are talented intellectually. Some people are talented with personal skills. Some people are physically gifted. Those are great. Those are wonderful things, but it's nothing to be haughty about. It's like Larry's saying, it's something that puts a responsibility on you to work hard and to develop. And then, like Michael said, it's then also understanding and appreciating that this was from Hashem. I'm not a brilliant mathematician, because of anything that I did. Hashem gave me that talent, gave me that gift. Now, I if I take it then and I work very hard to develop it and to use it for positive things, that's something that I should be grateful for and be joyful about. And it doesn't mean that I have to, pretend that I'm not a brilliant. I don't have to walk around, I'm such an idiot. I can't even add 2 + 2. You have to be, if you have a gift, you should recognize that you have the gift. Don't pretend that you don't have it, but then take it and use it in a positive way. Les and Scott, and then Susie.
No, I don't have anything to add to that.
Oh, you had your virtual hand in the air, so okay. Scott?
You could actually quote with great, this reminded me of, with great powers come great responsibilities, Spider-Man. But it's true. That's exactly what you're talking about.
That's a great, right? With great powers come great. It's brilliant. That's exactly right.
Spider-Man. That's
Spider-Man.
awesome.
That's right. That's right. And so don't pretend that you don't have great powers. If you do, that's not what you're supposed to, that's not the right approach. Recognize and understand that you have them, but know that they are a gift that Hashem gave you, and that they hold you responsible. Okay, Susie, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that this is very compatible with the concept of chosenness. Hashem chose us for further responsibility in the world, to do the mitzvot, to be a light unto the nations. And so Hashem then, if he gives you a gift, he's also chosen you for a job. And you have to find it and use it and maximize it.
Right, exactly. So it's a microcosm of being the chosen people. It's the exact same concept. we are not the chosen people. The reason why the chosen people concept gives us such a bad rap is because people think it means that because we're chosen, we're superior and we have privileges and we can dominate other people. That's how every nation in the history of the world who has made a claim of chosenness has used that chosen status that they believe that they have to dominate other people. We're chosen, so we have, so we have a right to, I remember when I lived in Yugoslavia, the Serbs had a tradition that they were the chosen people, and that's what motivated or justified, the concept of a greater Serbia, where we're the chosen people. So we should invade the Croats and the Bosnians and take over and create a greater Serbia because we're the chosen people. But we understand that chosenness doesn't mean that at all. Chosenness means that it just means that the Jewish people have a unique gift and a unique responsibility to bring that gift to the world. And on a microcosmic level, the same thing is true about each of us individually. Every human being is a chosen person. If you woke up this morning, Hashem chose you for something. So what did he choose you for? What's your contribution? It's a great quote. It's a question about who said it exactly, but the quote is, that the purpose of life is to discover your gift, and the meaning of life is to give that gift away. There's a slightly different version of the quote, which is the meaning, the purpose of life is to discover your gift. The work of life is to hone and develop that gift. And the meaning of life is to give that gift away. So that's right. That's exactly what we're talking about over here. Okay. Where were we up to? Okay, so we finished 233, I think. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue on 234. Although the thought process that leads to haughtiness is always the same, its manifestations are varied. Okay, let's see how this haughtiness can show up in our lives. However, after a person establishes in his heart that he is important and worthy of praise, the result of this thought process, i.e. the haughty behavior that ensues, will not manifest itself in only one way. Rather, the results can emerge from it in many. The results that can emerge from it are many and varied. And among them are even behaviors that contradict each other. But despite the vast differences between them, these results are all spawned from the same root cause of inner haughtiness. And both of the contradictory behaviors are directed towards the same goal of eliciting praise from others. Well, he's going to go into this, but what I wanted to just mention over here is that I've always felt that there's an underlying issue beneath haughtiness, which is insecurity. Right? When I think about the people in my life that I've known that I consider to be extremely arrogant, that lack humility, I think about them and I think the common denominator with all of them is a deep insecurity. Because if a person has a healthy sense of self and they've developed their own self-worth and their own bituach atzmi, as they call it in Hebrew, self-confidence and sense of self-worth, then they don't need to project into the world how great they are and how gifted they are and how magnificent they are in every area. So I think it really at the core of a haughtiness is a real sense of who am I and what am I worth. And I don't know if he's going to mention this, but I think the way to really tackle arrogance, the trait of arrogance at its root, is to do things to develop one's awareness and sense of their own self-worth. And real self-worth comes not from external praise and not from achievements and accomplishments and accolades and awards, but it comes from a deep awareness of the fact that Hashem created me and wants me in this world, and he believes in me, and he has faith in me, and has invested in me, which means there has to be something some worth that I have to bring into this world. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. So when a person
Rabbi,
really, yeah,
what if one of the not facets, but opposites of haughtiness is, excessive modesty? What are the limits of modesty? When should you refuse to accept an honor that is presented to you?
So that's a great question. It's we were talking about this recently in a board meeting about anonymous donors, right? On one hand, we're told by the Rambam, Maimonides, that the highest level of charity is to give anonymously, because you're not getting any praise or recognition for it. You're just doing it because it's a mitzvah. It's the right thing to do, right? But on this other hand, from the point of view of the organization, anonymous donors are not ideal, because when you give with your name attached to it, and 5 of your friends see that you made this significant donation to the organization, and you contributed in a meaningful way because it's a great organization that you believe in, so they might also be motivated to say, hey, you know what, so and so gave a great donation to this organization, I'm going to do it too. Or they may even feel some level of pressure, peer pressure, to donate to the organization because all their friends did. So there's a balance. On one hand, the humility says, no one has to know how much I donated. I don't need anybody to wow, what a generous guy. But on the other hand, sometimes it's better to to take that recognition, because it can have an additional benefit to the organization. So the same thing is true with like receiving rewards. Like, every organization that does an annual banquet, a lot of organizations, it's not so popular anymore, but schools, school dinner, school banquet, and shul banquets and stuff, and they always honor somebody. There's always an honoree or a couple that they honor, and every organization will tell you that it's hard to find an honoree, because usually when you approach somebody, they say, I don't want to be honored. I don't want to be the honoree, And on one hand, that's great. That's a humility. Like, I don't want to stand up in front of everybody and have them talk about how dedicated I have been to this community. And maybe there's a movie about, they make a promotional video about me, whatever. Who wants that? I don't want that. But on the other hand, here's an opportunity for you to do something really meaningful for the organization, to help the organization raise critical funds. So Ben, to answer your question, it's a balance, and it depends. And the real question is why. If you want to be honored, if you're like waiting for some organization to notice you and honor you and make you their honoree, then there's probably a haughtiness issue going on. But if you desperately don't want it, but you're willing to do it anyway because it's for the good of the organization that you believe in, then it's the right thing to do, right? So it really depends on the details and the situation, but it's a good question. There are times when accepting honor is the right thing to do, but you can accept honor with humility also, and that's a key. How to accept honor with humility. Okay. Let's see on the bottom of 234. So one type of haughty person can be found who thinks of himself that since he is worthy of praise, and he is, in his estimation, unique and distinguished in stature, it is also befitting for him to conduct himself in a unique and distinguished way. with great dignity in everything he does, whether in his manner of walking, his manner of sitting, his manner of standing up, his manner of talking, and the manner of all of his actions. Thus he will walk only with great deliberation, bringing his ankle only to the side of his big toe with every step. He will sit only while leaning back. He will rise only little by little, like a snake, uncoiling himself. He will not converse with everyone, only with the most eminent members of society. And and even among them, he will speak only terse statements, like the statements of the teraphim. I have no idea what that means. Similarly, with all the rest of his actions, that is, in the manner of his movements, his activities, his eating and his drinking, his mode of dress, and all of his other ways, he will conduct himself with much gravitas, as if all his flesh were made of lead and his bones were made of stone or sand. Okay, so in other words, you have some people who conduct themselves, the manner that they project themselves, the way they project themselves into the world is, I am nobility, aristocracy. You know, there's, you have to use an English accent when you imitate that guy, and that's a blatant, a blatant, obvious form of arrogance, right? But now, going back to Ben's point, what about, there are examples in our own tradition of rabbis, of Hasidic rabbis, or very famous rabbinical figures that did present themselves in that way. So there are specific examples. There was one Rebbe who rode in a golden carriage, literally, and he was wealthy, and his house was adorned with all kinds of magnificent fixtures and fancy furniture and everything. So you could look at that and say, this Rebbe is like unbelievably arrogant and haughty. But the truth is, he was a great tzaddik. So how is that consistent? How is there a consistency between somebody who's a great holy tzaddik who's carrying himself like British aristocracy? Yeah, Les, what do you think?
I think it has to do with what Michael said, going back a little bit, that these are gifts from Hashem, and that we have no reason at a foundational level to feel as if we are the cause of our own status, so that we have to be respectful of ourselves because we are the repository of something that was given to us that was of great value. So behaving in a dignified way can be an expression of our recognition of the fact that what we have is a gift. It's not anything that we necessarily can take credit for on our own.
Okay, I agree with that, but wouldn't you say that there's like a limit to that? Like there's acting in a dignified manner, and then there's presenting yourself as if you're some kind of like nobility, right? I mean, wouldn't that cross the line? Doesn't that go like a little bit too far, maybe?
Absolutely. And a good example of this is Moses. Moses was known as the most humble of people, and yet he was clear in his understanding of just how elevated his status was. The only person who could actually have face-to-face
conversations. Yeah. But I was thinking, what came to mind for me was the Kohanim, the priests. I'm specifically talking about this one particular example that I'm giving, but there are other examples like it of great rabbinical figures who presented themselves in a way of nobility and aristocracy, with golden carriages and expensive clothing and furniture. And so I was thinking about the Kohanim, right? Why there are two entire portions in the Torah that are dedicated to describing the incredibly expensive, elaborate, ornate clothing of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. with the 12 stones and the gold robes. And why would the Torah want the most important spiritual figure of the nation to dress in such an extremely extravagant, elaborate, way? Why would the Torah require that the greatest spiritual leader of the nation dress in as if he's like a king in a sense?
I think it's because he was expected to do honor to the status that he was given. It's like an elected official, for example. They have to behave in a dignified way because they were selected to represent something that went beyond themselves. So
exactly.
The sense is this isn't me that I'm doing these things for. It is respect for the position that I have been given.
Exactly. And the Kohen Gadol represents the glory of Hashem. So you have to look at the Kohen Gadol and see him with such respect and dignity because of what he stands for and what he represents in the world. So the same thing would be the case with a rabbi, who might have gold robes, or might present himself in a way of nobility, if he's doing it because he has an insatiable need to be for honor and recognition, and because he's got a tremendous arrogance inside of him, then that would be highly problematic. But we work under the assumption that a great tzaddik is not an arrogant person, that he's the opposite of an arrogant person, that he's a humble individual whose whole life is dedicated to spirituality. So how do we square a person like that with the way he's presenting himself in the world in a way of aristocracy? The answer is the same thing as the Kohen. To his disciples, to his Hasidim, he is the representative of Hashem in this world. He is the physical representative. He is the conduit in some sense between them and Hashem. And because of that, he has to hold himself on this very high, dignified way. But it doesn't come from or originate from an arrogance on his part. If anything, it comes from a certain level of humility and recognition of who he is and what he is. So it all depends on the mindset, right? You can have two people acting and presenting in the same way, and one of them can be a terribly arrogant individual, and one of them could be a very humble spiritual person. It's more about what's motivating that type of behavior. Susie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say though that when Hashem designated certain things that the king of Israel should do, one of them was to carry a Torah with them everywhere they went, so that they would remember who was really in charge of things and whose will needed to be done. So that's an example of I guess the inverse, that you have to maintain your humility despite your position.
Right. And that's the balance. That's a great example, right? He's the king. And on one hand, he has to carry himself like the king. And the Talmud says that if a king wants to relinquish his kavod, his honor due to him, he's actually not allowed to. If a parent wants to give up, forego the dignity, the kavod, the honor that's due to them by a child, they're allowed to, because it's up to them. If I don't need my kid to stand up for me when I walk into the room, then I can, take them off the hook for that. I could tell them, you don't need to do that, because it's my kavod, and I can decide if I want to maintain my kavod or not. But a king his kavod is not his kavod; it's Hashem's kavod. It's the kavod. It's the kavod of the Am, of the nation, and he doesn't have a right to forego it. So on one hand, he has to be incredibly dignified and demand respect and honor, but at the same time, how does he as a human being not become arrogant in that case? And the answer is what you're saying, is he has to carry a Sefer Torah around with him all the time and constantly read from it to remind himself who he is and where he fits into the hierarchy, that he might be a king, but he's only a human being. And there's a Melech Malchei HaMelachim, a king of kings, whose will is the only true will in this world. Yeah, that's a great point. But the example that I gave of the Hasidic Rebbe with the gold carriage is sort of a in a sense it's uncommon. It's an anomaly, but the typical tzaddik, as when we think of a tzaddik, a righteous person throughout history, we think of people with extreme humility. Like the Chafetz Chaim. It was known that the Chafetz Chaim, whenever he had to like be on the dais for something, he had to sort of be up in front of an assembly. He always showed up before everybody else because he didn't want anyone to stand up for him. When he, if he walked in late, then everyone would stop what they're doing and stand up and honor him. He didn't want that kind of honor. He never wanted to be called the rabbi. He didn't want any appellations attached to his name. He wanted just to be viewed as a simple, humble person. In Jerusalem, you have tzaddikim, great, hugely righteous people that if you saw them on the street, you wouldn't think they were, you would think they were Moshe the water carrier or something. They're just like regular, simple looking individuals that you would never be able to distinguish as being gigantic Torah scholars, but they are, because the value is placed on presenting yourself in a way of great humility. Okay, let's just see the second manifestation of haughtiness, and then I think we'll stop after this because I gotta do a bunch of things. So another kind of haughty person can be found who thinks that since he is worthy of praise and is a person of many good qualities, he ought to terrify the entire world and everyone should tremble before him. For it is not proper that people should dare speak with him or ask something of him. And should they boldly proceed to approach him, he will frighten them with his loud voice and confuse them with the resonance of his lips by answering them brazenly, while his face exudes anger at all times. Okay, that's pretty extreme. I don't know, if we can think of such examples of that, but there are definitely people that carry themselves with this air of superiority. Like, how dare you approach me? Who are you to come up to me and ask me a question? And that's obviously not something that that we want to have anything to do with, really. Let's just read the next paragraph. In this previous example of haughtiness leads the person to act pridefully. Ramchal now offers an example of haughtiness with an opposite appearance. Okay, this is what he's trying to point out, that haughtiness can show up in many different ways. There's another kind of haughty person who thinks to himself that he is already so great and distinguished that it's impossible for honor to be separated from him, and therefore he has absolutely no need for any more display of it. To demonstrate this matter, i.e., that he has no need for honor, he will perform actions like those of a humble person and will go to extremes to demonstrate great self-effacement and unbounded humility, all while he inwardly swells with pride, saying to himself, I'm so lofty and so distinguished that I no longer need additional honor, and I should surely forego it as I already possess it in abundance. Okay, this is the opposite. This is the false humility. Just because a person is conducting himself as a humble person doesn't mean that he's humble. It could mean the exact opposite. It could mean that he's so extremely arrogant inside that he thinks to himself, like, I don't even have to, play by the rules of normal societal norms. I can just, be whoever I want. Sometimes you see like very wealthy people that are so extreme in their in their laid back presentation in the world, the way they dress like bums, and they think that they're so great that they don't even have to pretend to be anything to the world, and that's another form of arrogance. It doesn't look like arrogance. You have to dig a little bit to recognize that this is really being generated by incredible gaiva, but the truth is that sometimes this humble looking person can really be just the opposite. Yeah, Scott.
So it's funny because every time I hear something like that, I think of Sam Walton, the billionaire who drove a pickup truck and wore a John Deere hat every day.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? And he would go into his stores, his Walmarts, and see how customer service was, because he looked the part of someone without money.
Right. So now, you know, you look at that guy and you think to yourself, like, is that a great quality? Is that a great trait? Is that just humility, you know, because he doesn't think of himself as being any better than anybody else? Or is that coming from such an incredible level of arrogance that he's just like, you know, he's beyond having to present himself, you know, in any kind of dignified manner in the world?
No,
You don't know. You don't know.
You don't know, right? Exactly, right.
Well,
But-
in the case of Sam Walton, that's
We do
really
know.
who he was.
Yeah, that's who he
Yeah,
was.
I think it's the
An
first one, right.
unbelievably humble,
Right.
generous, hardworking guy.
Wow.
It's
He
a
may not be able to
fantastic
say
book.
that about his kids, but he was
Yeah.
unbelievable. He was an
His kids are
unbelievable guy.
terrible, right?
Yeah.
Read his book; it's phenomenal.
So yeah, so you know, so we can't jump to any conclusions, then we can't make any assumptions, but you also can't, you know, what the Ramchal is trying to bring it to our attention is that humility and arrogance, let's say, arrogance presents itself in many different ways. Sometimes it can present itself in totally opposite ways. So you have to really ask yourself about yourself. We're only supposed to worry about ourselves. Don't worry about other people. Don't go around, you know, this guy, is he arrogant or is he humble? That's not for us to worry about. But for ourselves, what's generating our actions? What's motivating us to speak this way, to present ourselves this way in the world? Is it humility? Is it arrogance? And we need to give that real thought. Yeah, Les.
There's one other thing to think about when you have to give some thought to why somebody's projecting some way, because a key element of leadership is to project something, to concretize something that is of value that you want the organization to be able to focus on. In Sam Walton's case, he was showing that simply because you're wealthy doesn't mean that you are superior. And he was attempting to show his people a respect because he was one of them.
Yeah, very nice. I got to read his book. Okay, I have